Bloomsbury Diaries, January 2026. Last year, I read Theory and Practice by Australian author Michelle de Kretser. In this Stella Prize-winning novel, the main character is a graduate university student in 1986. She comes to a new city and tacks a poster of Virginia Woolf to her wall, ready to delve into her thesis about Woolf's work. As she does her research, she discovers that Virginia Woolf, whom she refers to as Wolf Mother, is not without flaws. Claire Dederer, in her compelling nonfiction work Monsters, A Fan's Dilemma, would refer to this as a stain on Woolf's work. In Theory and Practice, this throws the main character's world into question. How can she admire this writer when, as a person of color, she's being relegated to a silent background in Woolf's worldview, which the author does to an Indian character in her novel The Years? She questions all of Woolf's work and endeavors to ask those around her what they think of this problem. I asked Auntie if she'd read A Room of One's Own, and she asked if the Pope shat in the woods. That book explained my life. That's what I thought when I read it. It explains the life of every woman on the planet. I asked Lenny if he'd read A Room of One's Own. He said that Virginia Woolf was a product of the British upper middle class, and that her book was addressed to women like her. She knew nothing about working lives. I asked Shaz if she'd read A Room of One's Own. She said that it had changed her life. Virginia Woolf was like my mother if my mother had been like I wanted. I thought about her, our Wolf Mother. She was our Bilgenso theory, showing us how to understand ourselves in relation to the world. Our mothers closed doors in order to keep us safe and never stopped warning us about the dangers outside. The Wolf Mother said, "Imagine," and opened the doors in our minds. The Wolf Mother outed herself as a snob and a racist and an anti-Semite, failing us because mothers are obliged to fail. But her writing about women inspired us and gave us courage because our imaginations were bigger than hers. Our imaginations projected us into sentences intended for upper-middle-class Englishwomen. They propelled us into a future in which we were artists and scholars, and our lives were experimental adventures. In that future, we could destroy the Wolf Mother, rip her to pieces, and end up motherless and weeping, or we could frame her, put her up on a wall, and keep her under glass. My index card testified to current trends in Woolf scholarship. The French feminists adored her because her radically maternal prose disrupted the word of the father and the symbolic order. The Anglo-American feminists adored her because she wrote women-centered fiction and theorized the material conditions of women's lives. Paula adored her because Paula needed a major undergraduate-friendly woman writer for her first-year unit on modernism. When a creative or artist does something wrong, hurtful, or harmful, what is our responsibility as the audience? Cancel culture has offered one course of action, but is that reaction going to make society better, or does it discredit the art completely and make us feel guilty for liking or loving it? From Monsters, page 42 and 43. In any case, calling someone a monster didn't solve the problem of what to do with the work. I could denounce him all I wanted, but Polanski's work still called to me. This insistent calling and my unwillingness to throw away the work disrupted my idea of myself. It made me and others question my claim to feminism. I realized that for me, over the past few years of thinking about Polanski, thinking about Woody Allen, thinking about all these complicated men I loved, the word had come to take on a new meaning. It meant something more nuanced and something more elemental. It meant someone whose behavior disrupts our ability to apprehend the work on its own terms. A monster, in my mind, was an artist who could not be separated from some dark aspect of his or her biography. Maybe it works for light aspects too. Maybe there are golden monsters, but it seems very unlikely, or at best, very rare. To me, we have to sit with our discomfort, knowing that artists, writers, musicians, everyone is complex and problematic in some way. There is no perfect human making art without a stain. What that means to us is that we have to negotiate for ourselves how we will admire or reject or actively campaign against someone's art based on their actions. As the character Auntie in Theory and Practice says about Virginia Woolf, 10 minutes with her and I'd be calling for a gun, but she helped build my brain, you know? And as Claire Dederer shares in relation to the film Manhattan by filmmaker Woody Allen, the men say they want to know why Woody Allen makes women so angry. After all, a great work of art is supposed to bring us a feeling. And yet, when I say Manhattan makes me feel irpy, a man says, no, not that feeling. You're having the wrong feeling. He speaks with authority. Manhattan is a work of genius. But who gets to say? Authority says the work shall remain untouched by the life. Authority says biography is fallacy. Authority believes the work exists in an ideal state, ahistorical, alpine, snowy, pure. Authority ignores the natural feeling that arises from biographical knowledge of a subject. Authority gets snippy about stuff like that. Authority claims it is able to appreciate the work free of biography, of history. Authority sides with the male maker against the audience. I noticed something. I noticed that I'm not ahistorical or immune to biography. That's for the winners of history. Men, so far. Bringing this back to Virginia Woolf, her own life was riddled with her biases on display, given her societal adherence to anti-Semitism, while married to Leonard Woolf, who was Jewish. Dederer writes, I found myself reading a collection of Woolf's diaristic writings titled Carlyle's House and Other Sketches in the great reading room of the University of Washington Library. I won't enumerate her various flippant anti-Semitic marks, but it turns out her diaries were pocked with them. It was a marital joke that she referred to her husband Leonard as my Jew. For of course, this is the complicating factor. Woolf was married to a Jewish man, and as one of the Bloomsburys, she seemed to be a model of tolerance. I mentioned to a Jewish friend that I'd rumbled Virginia Woolf's anti-Semitism and had been thinking about how this stained her work or didn't. My friend replied matter-of-factly, well, if we give up on the anti-Semites, we'll have to give up everyone. Why has Woolf's anti-Semitism been forgotten? It's far from the first thing we think of when we think of her, and it's a small thing, a casual thing, a buried thing. As with T.S. Eliot and Edith Wharton and Dostoevsky, we think first and foremost of literary output. When confronted with their anti-Semitism, we think of it as something that has to do with their moment in history, as if the anti-Semitism were the weather of the era and it simply blew over these writers. There are many ways we try to write off sentiments of these public figures as products of their time, but that in itself is too simplistic given the times we live in. Today, we have all of these issues when one is supposed to know better, and yet these sentiments persist. In Monsters, Dederer says, we think it's ignorance on the part of these people in the past. We imagine these poor, deluded souls simply waiting for scales to fall from their eyes. But in fact, what is really happening is that anti-Semitism and racism were often tied to a larger project of domination. As I said earlier, consuming a piece of art is two biographies meeting, the biography of the artist, which might disrupt the consuming of the art, and the biography of the audience member, which might shape the viewing of the art. I repeat, this occurs in every case. Have these two books changed my feelings about Virginia Woolf? Yes, I think so. Should I let her flaws fade because I am a fan of her work? No, I can't do that. What I can do is see her work through the lens of her time, while also living with my biases and stains in view. I understand that my privilege makes it easier for me to like and engage with her work, while there are other artists whose work I actively boycott and refuse to engage with, again, for other reasons, also relating to my values and lines drawn in the sand. I will not defend Woolf to another who has rejected her because of their values. I will instead live with my choices and try to understand those of others, while also acknowledging that sometimes the choices of art that are loved by others may make me think differently about that person due to my values and choices. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments. Thanks for watching.